I sincerely greet you from the depth of my heart, my wonderful student. It's nice to be with you again on this discourse. History is the subject we are discussing again. And today, I'm taking you down memory lane as usual, for we are going to look at the British conquest. We're going to take you to the British era when they colonized us. In this course, we have traversed places like the Kanem Borno Empire. We've gone to Dahomey. We've also discussed about the rich cultural value of the Yoruba culture, stating about different wars, the Kiriji War, the Owu War, the Dahomey War, the Ijebu War, and so many other historical conquests. Today is another beautiful day in our historical analysis, and I welcome you all on board. Today, we've mentioned that the British conquest of Nigeria is going to be discussed, and you should know before the Union Jack was lowered and the British flag and the Nigerian flag started occupying our scene, this was what we will reckon with the British and the British flag. Now, in the course of today, it is very interesting to know that we're going to examine the cause of the development between the British and the Nigerian people and examine why the British changed their policy in Nigeria and established British rule. What brought them here? And what did they do? We shall also undertake this task by examining specific events in the history of Nigeria, and that will include the annexation of Lagos in 1861, the Scramble and partition, if you rather add, and various punitive expeditions in Nigeria. Now, Nigerian-British relationship and background to British occupation. The British began to alter the nature of the relationship between themselves and Nigeria from about the mid-19th century. From that period, the British traders began to move away from the coast. Remember, they were at the coast due to so many reasons, because of the advantage it brings about movement and transportation. They began to establish direct contact with Nigerians in the interior. They were helped by two major factors. What are those factors? First, it had been discovered in the 1840s that malaria, which had killed so many Europeans in the past, could be prevented by the drug quinine. You know, malaria was a pandemic. It was not just endemic. It was something like a scourge, so, something like a problem like similar to what we're having in the case of the coronavirus that is decimating a lot of people before quinine was discovered as a drug. And hopefully, this menace, a vaccine, will be discovered that will nip it in the bud, if not totally obliterate it. So we are hopeful, since malaria came and it was conquered. Then it was killing a lot of white people. At the beginning of the 20th century, it was further realized that mosquitoes were responsible for carrying that disease. Now, we are still looking at what is causing this coronavirus. It took a lot of time to discover that it was mosquito, Anopheles mosquito. And that, therefore, if people took such precaution as sleeping under mosquito nets and other measures, that could reduce their chances of catching malaria parasites. Another factor that made them to move to the interior was that the British had decided to back their decision to move into the hinterland by force, and they possessed weapons that were greatly superior to those of the Nigerians. Now, they know the Nigerians were no match to them. The establishment of British political, social, and economic control over the Nigeria was achieved in phases. We shall discuss the decisive events in this process. The annexation of Lagos is one of them. Lagos was annexed. In 1851, Lagos was bombarded by British gunboats. The British had expelled Kosoko, the Lagos king, and installed Akintoye, whom they recognized as friendly towards them. Now, 10 years later, in 1861, the British government declared Lagos a colony of Britain. Yes, yes, colony of Britain. This was the beginning of the formal rule of Nigeria by Britain when they declared Lagos a colony in 1861. Akintoye is depicted here. Akintoye of Lagos. Now, we can ask ourselves, why did Britain decide on this course of action? The answer is found in the desire of Britain to ensure peace and stability in Lagos, so that she should do business effectively and pursue her trading activity profitably. Commerce is of greater interest. Secondly, Lagos was a major port, yes, and Britain needed a center from which it could export the resources of Nigeria to Europe and, if possible, import something cool. Yeah. Thirdly, Britain wanted to ensure that the people in Lagos pursued only legitimate commerce, not slave trading, which was trade in palm oil. That was what is legitimate, coke, cotton, and other items that will serve the new industries in Britain. Also, it was to ensure that the slave trade was now revived. Britain sought to exercise political control over Lagos. Remember, we've talked about slavery as a very worst event in human history, although we are still having modern slavery, where some people are giving promises of good job and taken away to be subjected to excruciating, dehumanizing conditions, young girls into slavish prostitution and other forms of inhuman treatment. Look at these people handled like animals. That was the bad side of slavery. But it was worse that our own people also took part in selling us. We've started discussing slavery and we'll continue to discuss it as a historical issue. Now, the claim advanced by the British that Lagos was a notorious slave depot in 1851 was clearly a half-truth, but not an outright lie. This was an exaggeration, it was overblown. It is also not accurate to declare, as one contemporary observer did, that Lagos was annexed in 1861. Why? Because the permanent occupation of this important point in the Bight of Benin is indispensable. Can't do without it, to the complete suppression of the slave trade, because it did not end the slave trade totally. The bombardment of Lagos and the eventual annexation was motivated by economic and political concern, of which the least important was the wish to suppress the slave trade. It was not the reason for annexing Lagos. The immediate background to this bombardment, Lagos, was this. That's what started it off. The kingship of Lagos was disputed by two Obas, Oba Akintoye and Oba Kosoko. Now, in 1845, Oba Akintoye had the upper hand and he decided to abolish the slave trade. Yes, he didn't find slave trading as something nice. He decided to abolish it right there. This decision divided Lagos society and civil war ensued, in which Kosoko, leading the pro-slavery party, succeeded in deposing Akintoye. And in 1851, the British decided to reinstate Akintoye, and so they used their gunship to bombard Lagos in order to force Kosoko to flee. The Oba had to run for their life. This type of high-handed action was typical of British foreign policy at the time. They used it quite often, and is particularly associated with the British Foreign Secretary, Lord Palmerston. We sometimes refer to this way of dealing with foreign policy powers as gunboat diplomacy. Gunboat diplomacy. Now the scramble and partition. The so-called scramble for Africa was a race by the European countries to obtain possession of slices of land in Africa. You know, they gathered in Berlin from 1884 to 1885. to bring out the map of the Africa and start sharing them, scrambling for them, partitioning and gathering it. At the conference, the European countries agreed on the rules for securing these territories and on the doctrine of effective occupation, if possible, suppression. During the scramble, the British had to compete with the French and the German in Nigeria. So it was not only the British that fought for the occupation of Nigeria. Therefore, the rush to acquire territories was a reaction to the international rivalry. So between European powers in the second half of the century. But there were also other reasons. According to one theory, the scramble was caused by a combination of economic and imperial motives. European powers were looking for raw materials and markets for the new industries that were springing up in Europe, manufacturing industry. So this economic factor was very strong and explains the European rivalry on the Niger Delta. So they wouldn't want anybody to take the upper hand among them. There was also the Imperial Factor, which was the desire by Europeans to own portions of Africa, where they could settle their excess population and victims of unemployment. Caused by the World Depression of 1873 to 1893? Yes, they had a lot of problems due to the World Depression and due to the World Depression between 1873 and 1893. So this theory is often associated with the famous German philosopher Karl Marx and his disciple, the leader of the Russian revolutionary Vladimir Lenin. You know, Karl Marx, Lenin, these are apostles of socialism that were opposed to capitalism. And they look forward to capitalist motive, proclivities, acquisitive tendencies being abolished so that socialism and communism can be enthroned so that people can work according to their ability and giving according to their needs. It was utopian and imaginary, but it's still used to analyze issues in social order till today. They argued that imperial expansion was the natural reaction of capitalist society, which were producing more goods than they could consume, and where profits were falling because of strong competition from other capitalist society. Yes, scramble, competition. This is why one Marxist economists describe imperialism as the highest form of capitalism. The highest form of capitalism. We are still being imperialized today, where we will not do anything without consulting the world power. We won't survive. We have to take loan from them. We have to subject ourselves to loanish slavery conditions that will impoverish our generation to come because we want, and that is imperialism, the worst form of capitalism. The scramble was also a response to the invitation of the missionaries and the humanitarians who believed that Africans were backward. So we are not enlightened. They want to enlighten us in their own way. It's a reaction of the Europeans. They believe that they possess a superior mind. They were created perfect. They were created better. We are black monkeys and animals. They want to colonize us. They want to educate us. We never had norms. We never have morals. We never have values. They want to teach us their own ways. That was their right or duty to rule over Africa. So they claim, so they believe. They had every right. They have all the powers, all the temerity, all the wherewithal to rule over us. But such people with their racist views also acted in self-interest and wanted to make profit. Many believed that as Christians and philanthropists, they had a moral duty to undertake a civilization in Africa, a civilizing mission, to eliminate ignorance, to remove superstition and poverty. However, as French, British, and Germans frequently fought with each other in Africa, it is obvious that that so-called civilizing mission was less important than national pride. So they were also scrambling for supremacy and fighting themselves to acquire what was their real motive, commerce, not a civilizing mission at all. And patriotism, as each European country tried to increase its own wealth and stretch, so they compromised their national pride and patriotism. The British, the first phase of British conquest, the British established their first colony in Nigeria and Lagos. Mentioned that where they took control in 1861. However, British rule did not succeed in bringing either prosperity or security to Lagos. The main reason for this is that trade with the interior was being disrupted by the civil war in Yoruba. The issue of colonization had taken place more than 50 years before even amalgamation. So the main reason for this is trade. We want to trade with the interiors. Of course, we discussed in our last class how it was not easy to penetrate some Yoruba lands. There were blockades because of the SSS of the Bada Kingdom, who were acquiring arms from Porto Novo to claim supremacy over the Yoruba land. So the main reason here is to do trade with the interiors. They have to get that by force, and that is their usual game. Now, by 1890, the British government in Lagos decided to send a military expedition into the interior to establish a protectorate over the whole of Yoruba land. This was sometimes achieved by agreement with local paramount chief. During the Kata expedition of 1893 to 94, a treaty was made with the Alaafin of Oyo, and the British Resident Council was placed in Ibadan in 83. Had no choice. Had to get it or fight for it. However, the protectorate over Yoruba land was also achieved by violent conquest. Many people were killed when the British sent a military expedition to Ijebu in 1892. Ijebu military expedition of 1892. Many people were killed. So elsewhere in Nigeria, there was the same mixture of peaceful treaties and violent coercion. In Oyo Rivers, the British declared a protectorate in 1885. Here, Jaja of Opobo was the most powerful of the chiefs who had ruled Ishekiri land. They succeeded in extracting some concession from the British during negotiation. They wanted them to do something in return. Can't just come in like that. However, the British did not keep their promise to Jaja. And in 1887, he was tricked into leaving Opobo and was deported to the Gold Coast and then to the West Indies. My God. Similar tactics of trickery were used against Nana Olumo, who had agreed to a British protectorate. Rather, King Jaja was of Opobo, while Nana Olumo was Ishekiri. I remember mentioning Jaja under Ishekiri. No, it's Opobo, while Nana Olumo. See, King Jaja of Opobo. And this is Nana Olumo of Ishekiri. These kings were deposed by the British ruler. This one was tricked into leaving his town, a spot. They took him to Gold Coast and from there to the West Indies, not to see his hometown anymore. That is British tactics. The British broke their promise to Nana and sent an expedition to arrest him in 1895. However, the most violent episode in the British conquest of southern Nigeria took place not in Opobo, the Niger Delta, and not in Ishekiri with Nana. It took place in Benin. Here, a treaty had been signed in 1892 with Oba Ovaranwe. In 1897, an expedition was sent to depose that Oba. Look at Oba Ovaranwe. In the book Ovaranwe Nobaise, written by Olaro Timi, I read that book during my secondary school days. It depicts the Western conquest of the Benin Kingdom. You see people like Obakavbai, Obayawuna, Olobosere, people that resisted the incursion of the British. You will see what happened, what the British did to the Benin under Oba Ovaranwe. The people of Benin naturally resisted this action and killed the British soldiers sent to arrest their king. The British were outraged and sent another expedition to arrest the Oba. This time, the people of Benin were not matched for the British. Of course, they possessed very superior weapons, and soon the palace of the Oba was sacked. Again, blood, sorrow, and tears, their regular trademark, if I should borrow the words of the Ebami Eda, Fela and Nicola Bokuti. They live sorrows, blood, and tears, their regular trademark. They live sorrows, blood, and tears, their regular trademark. Many people lost their lives when Ovaramwe Palace was sacked. Remember, people also lost their lives during the Opobo, though they tricked him and sent him Dovecourt. Nana or Lumo of Ishekiri, many people also paid the price. Here was the worst in Benin. Now, they didn't only depose this king, so to speak, they did other atrocities. They looted their bronzes, the special bronze of the Benin Kingdom. Took it, stole it to London, where they were sold or given to the European art collectors in their museums. Also in Igbo land, the commercial strength of the Arochukwu Igbo annoyed the British. It annoyed them so much. Look at the Benin expedition. When they were killed, they came again. In fact, while they lie here, they will totally annihilate everything in sight and obliterate the city. The success of the Arochukwu traders angered the British, and this was owed to the great deal to the power of the oracle, which was respected throughout the Igbo land. The Arochukwu masquerade here depicts the oracle. This is the Agaba, the dreaded Agaba masquerade of Arochukwu, who depicted the Arochukwu gods, the oracle. It was respected throughout Igbo land. Between 1901 and 1902, the British fought a war with Arochukwu and succeeded in destroying the oracle. As in Benin, the decisive factor was the superiority of the British weapon, which they used to destroy everywhere the shrine. Even the oracle could not protect them. The oracle was destroyed. My God. When we come to northern Nigeria, we find the same pattern of conquest. Trickery, bloody violence. It has been seen that the Royal Niger Company under Sir George Goldie had extended into its control to Nupe and Ilorin. Beyond this area, there were territorial disputes between the British, French, and Germans. The British realized that the Royal Niger Company was not powerful or reliable enough to be trusted, with the task of negotiating with other European powers and bringing the rest of northern Nigeria under British control. So that is why the charter was revoked on 1st January 1900. Here, the British settled their dispute with the Germans and the French and claimed a protectorate over the northern Nigeria. Sir Frederick Lord Lugard was appointed the High Commissioner. You can't discuss the history of Nigeria without mentioning this amalgamator, without mentioning Sir Frederick Lord Lugard, who amalgamated the northern and southern protectorates, who his wife named our country Nigeria from the Niger River. This is the man that brought strange bedfellows together, the atheists, Hindus, traditional religionists, Christians, free thinkers, brought them together in an act of unholy wedlock, so they begin to lock horns like he-goats and dogs up to today, because brought people of different, varied background for your colonial interests, for administrative convenience. History will always remember you, Sir Frederick Lord Lugard. He deposed the emirs of Nupe and Yola and replaced them with emirs who were friendly to the British. In 1903, a military expedition was sent out against Kano, and after a short but violent battle, the Fulani emir was deposed. British then turned their attention to Sokoto, which they conquered in March 1903. Conquest continues. The emir Tahiri escaped and fighting continued as British forces pursued the emir across northern Nigeria. Finally, in July, the British caught up with Atahiru, and in a battle near Bomi, the emir was killed. As a result, the whole of the huge Sokoto Caliphate was brought under British control. What a wild, wild war. One can conclude that by 1903, much of the Nigeria had been brought under the British flag, but pockets of resistance remain in Tiviland, in Igboland, Ibaland, even after the 1914 amalgamation. Remember, even during the rule of Britain, they used indirect rule, which did not succeed at all in the East, because the East has no king. It succeeded in the North because of their system of government, partially in the West, and didn't succeed in the East. We mentioned that there were pockets of resistance and different issues happened, attacks, killing of white men, and others here. This is the British Northern Conquest depicted here. And this is the amalgamator himself. These are the people that ruled. Mention Lord Lugard. History will not fail to remember him. Nigerian reaction to British conquest. How did we react? Did it go down well? It is clear that Nigeria did not just fold their arms and watch as the British defeated the armed resistance of their fellow men. While some joined the British in fighting against their fellow Nigerians, many took up arms against the British, whom they considered as invaders. Many Nigerians thought, as the Anan ethnic group did, Anan of Ibibio, now Akwa Ibom State, Calabar. One of their leaders explained why they resisted the British. How? We were informed that these warlike people had come from Ibibio to Ifuhu near Ikorebene. When we heard this, we all ran away and hid in the bush. They fired at the people and burnt all the houses as they went. We armed ourselves to go and fight the white men and their soldiers. Every one of us say, what a disgraceful thing it is for another people to come and fight us on our own land. We have no palaver with them. Let us find out where they are and fight them. Are they not men like us? Are they not men like us? That's a rhetorical question that we'll continue to answer till the rest of time. We've come to the end of this analysis of the British conquest of the Nigeria, mentioning their motives, mentioning how they came, what brought them, how did they penetrate the interiors, what method did they use, the gunboat diplomacy, how Akintoye and Kosoko warred against the territory of Lagos, how the British played their part, what happened to Nana Olumo of Ishekiri, what happened to Jaja of Opobo, what happened to Atahiru of the northern Nigeria, what happened to the Sokoto Caliphate, how did the British conquer them. We mentioned all this, and it's been a wonderful time being with you. And I know as a historical student, you will continue to learn course to history and to learn more. Remember, we say that he who does not know where the rain start beating him, will not know where he start cleaning his body. And according to my professor, Adiela Fibo, in his book, The Rope of Sand, he said, let the past wake up in the present so that the future will not be born deformed. Without understanding the essence of the past, we will not be able to understand our position in the present so as to make a meaningful movement to the future. For us to navigate the future very well, the past must be clear on our side and the present wrongs must be corrected before we continue. Thank you all and God bless.